Well, what's going on, everybody? I'm Kevin from Cigar Prop, and it is time for another Tech Tip Sunday. Jessica and I are driving back from Boynton Beach, so I figured I would do this this morning and then post it this afternoon. Say hello, Jessica. Hello. So, one thing I used to recommend a lot, I think I've actually done at least 2 videos talking about fuel induction, fuel injection services. And it's not something I recommend anymore. And it's because of my own personal experience with my last vehicle. Had a GMC Acadia, had it since it was almost brand new, always took care of it, ran the best oil, ran the best gas, kept up on my fuel induction services. And when it was time to do a thermostat, because it had failed, I had to pull the intake manifold off the car, which exposed all the valves in the heads, and that's what the valves are what you're cleaning. That's really the only part of a fuel induction service. They do make fuel injection services, which they use a machine and they tie into your fuel injection rail, and they can clean your fuel injectors that way. When you're taking it into most shops, they're going to tell you you're cleaning your fuel injectors, and they're not. They're doing a fuel induction service. They're going to tell you your injectors are getting clean because they're putting a cheap thing in your gas tank, which is going to clean your injectors. Most of all of those are garbage, unless you're getting a good product from like BG. Makes probably hands down the best fuel injector cleaner that you pour into your gas tank. But most of the time they're going to do a fuel induction service. They're going to have a can of liquid, and they're either going to spray it into your throttle body, which is the best way, the method that I prefer, because it gives it even distribution throughout the upper intake area and all your valves. Or they're going to use the same can, but they're going to put it into a vacuum line and let the car suck it in. A little bit less efficient, without going into too much detail, just depending on where the vacuum line is located. Some cylinders may be cleaned more than others. That's why blowing it in through the throttle body is a much better process. But getting back to my own personal vehicle, pulled the intake manifold off, and I was surprised to see how much carbon was built up on my valves. And it's because I had a GDI, gas direct injection motor, which if you've got anything probably 2017 or newer, most likely you have a GDI motor with a high pressure pump. And what that means is there's a fuel injector inside the combustion chamber, spraying fuel directly into it, instead of having a fuel injector on top of the valves. Maybe, Kevin, if you think about it, throw some pictures up for people that may not know what you're talking about. But the gas is what cleaned the valves. So the valves were always staying clean as long as you were using good oil, changing your oil on time, using good fuel, not necessarily premium fuel, just a top tier fuel. And that was always the case. That everything stayed clean. You did your fuel induction services, every 15 to 30,000 miles, and you were good. And we're starting to see more and more of this as we're pulling intake manifolds off of vehicles, because things are failing a whole lot sooner than they have, But back in the day, it could be 100,000 miles before I pulled an intake manifold off a vehicle to do a spark plug, to do a gasket repair, or to do anything else. But a lot of this stuff we're seeing failing a lot sooner, 15, 20, 25,000 miles, we're having to do some of this stuff. Spark plugs, people think that they're still 100,000 miles. No, there's some manufacturers that have gone back to 15,000 miles, which is once a year doing your spark plug. So a lot of times we're having to pull the intake manifolds off, and we're just seeing so much carbon built up inside these engines. And you might be thinking, what's the solution? We don't know. There are some companies like BG making some really nice fuel induction services, but even when I just had my truck into the dealership, I wanted a fuel induction, fuel injection service, and because I know they use BG products and I knew the type of equipment they had, but they didn't even have the equipment that I really wanted to do a thorough a service. So eventually I'm going to have to probably drive a couple of hours to find a shop that has, the good service, that instead of costing $200 is $400 to $500, so yeah, fuel induction services, are they worth it in 2024? If you're driving anything with a gas direct injection GDI motor, it's really not worth it. You're just essentially just pissing your money away. And I hate to say that, because that's what, I'm in the business to sell you preventative maintenance items, and it's not something that I recommend to any of my customers anymore, because I think it's just essentially a waste of money, because it's just not doing it. And it's not just GDI motors; it's turbo motors. If you got a new turbo motor, it's going to be a GDI motor. Turbos don't ever let like some of these quick lubes and places that are big on these fuel induction service, because it's a big money maker. They got very little into it, and the profit margin is super high. Nobody's skilled. There takes no skill to do it at all. Is to hook a machine up to it and just let it let it do its thing. But like I said, not only you're not getting your money's worth, but when you go to a place like that, there's a potential for a lot of damage, and not damage that you're going to find or see on your ride home, or maybe even a week from now or a month from now. But especially if you got a turbo motor, you could have taken half the life off that turbo and the bearings just from running this chemical through there, and terms hydrolock, that it's scary. So you just got to be careful out there. Fuel induction services, no go. Shout out to Gary Brooks. Wanted me to bring up brake flushes while we got a couple minutes left. Brake flushes, you got to do your brake flushes. We get these old guys in all the time. It's always the old guys. I don't believe in any of that stuff. You're just trying to upsell me. All right, it's a thing. It's a fluid on a vehicle, just like your oil. Why are you changing your oil? Why do you change your oil? Because the manufacturer recommends you do that. And same thing with brake flushes. The manufacturer recommends you do that. We do get some guys say, I just suck out my master cylinder every now and then, and I put fluid in it, and as you can see, it's nice and clean. It's not the only part of a brake flush. Brake flush is, I remove the bleeders, hook up a pressure bleeder to the master cylinder, forced fluid through at a very low pressure, because your brake caliper can hold dirt and debris, and just by sucking out the master cylinder and putting new fluid in, you're not getting that debris out of your brake caliper. So you've got to flush out. You have to have a machine to either suck out through the caliper. I don't like that. I like having a low pressure machine hooked up to the master cylinder, forcing the fluid through the whole system, because you're forcing it past the ABS valves. You're getting everything clean, gets to the caliper, forces all that dirt and debris out of the caliper. So brake flushes, you got to do those. You got to do those every 2 years, whether you need it or not. The fluid could look clean, but all your brake lines are coated in copper. Brake fluid becomes acidic over time. The acid dissolves that copper, and that's what gets built up in your ABS valve, so makes them stop working. That's what builds up in your calipers. So yeah, fuel induction services, no. Brake fluid exchanges, get those done every 2 years. By someone that's got a machine. Don't let those quick lubes just crack the bleeders and do what we call a gravity bleed. You're getting ripped off. You're not getting anything done. And like I said, you're just wasting your money. If you don't see any type of machine hooked up to your vehicle, when the technician's doing a brake flush, they're not doing it properly. Don't pay for that service, because you got ripped off. So, all right, cats and kittens. See you next Sunday.